Okay, we're working on the $400 Harley, the 1999 Harley Sportster 1200, and we're going to clean the carburetor out right now. First, you're going to start with this number 3 Phillips back here holding the seat down. Go ahead and take that out. And underneath, you'll have a bolt holding down this strap over the seat. It's an 11 millimeter or 7/16. Easiest way is to get in here with an electric ratchet. There are 2 bolts holding the gas tank on, one in the front, one in the rear. This side is a 1/4 inch Allen, and the other side is a 13 millimeter wrench. There are 2 lines going to the fuel valve. The big one is the fuel line going to the carburetor, and behind it there's a smaller hose, which is vacuum, coming off the intake manifold. First, you need to remove these 2 bolts, and these are 3/16 Allen heads. Check your air filter. These need replacing more often than you think. You need to remove these 2 bolts, and these are 5/16 Allen heads. Next are these 3 bolts, and they are 5/32. Next, remove the choke cable. It's a 17 millimeter wrench on the backside. Now you're ready to grab on the carburetor and give it a good yank. This one came out pretty easy, but don't expect yours to come out so easy. You might need to get forceful with it. There's 2 screws holding on the plate for the throttle cables. Number 2 Phillips. One on the side here and one on the top. Let's go to the bench. All right, let's see what we have in here. First, I'm noticing this deteriorated vacuum line. This is really important. This gets a crack in it. There's a couple things that happen. You'll run a little leaner because it's sucking more air in. One port goes to the fuel valve. If that gets a crack in the hose, then you may stop getting fuel from the gas tank. That would cause issues. The other port goes up to the VOES. There's a little switch, an electronic switch up there that helps control the timing. A vacuum leak in this little system would cost you performance issues all over the place. So, inspect that. All right, I forgot my gloves again. That's better. On these continual velocity carburetors, the cables come down and they control this butterfly right here. That opens the port to start letting air through. The slide on the back side of the carburetor is controlled by vacuum. As you open the butterfly on the front, the vacuum will increase. And there's a diaphragm up here that will raise the slide, thus letting in more air and fuel. Start with the top. There's 4 screws at the top. One of which is already out. Hold this on as you take the last screw out. There's a spring in there. You don't want any parts to go flying. Inspect this diaphragm for any cracks. This one seems fine, so I'm not going to replace it. If you're having any performance issues, this could very well be the culprit. Let's move to the bottom. There's 4 screws on the bottom of the float bowl. Number 2 Phillips. This one isn't bad at all. Well, depending on what you find in your carburetor when you tear it apart, you may have a lot more work to do. This one really isn't too bad. We're just going to clean the jets and then see if it wants to run. If you have a lot of buildup, I've found this MEK works really well. In California, you're only going to get the MEK substitute. You may have to do a ton of scrubbing, small wire brushes or screwdrivers, picks, needles. There may be a lot of things you need to use. 2 jets we're going to focus on, the main jet and the pilot jet. This 3rd spot here is the choke inlet. You can't remove this jet to clean it, so all you can do is shove something through it. I like to pluck a wire out of my wire brush to clean these. The metal on these wire brushes is really good steel. and they're tiny. Start by just making sure this choke jet is clear. There's not much you can do other than spray some carb cleaner in there and run a piece of wire through it. Make sure you open the choke when you blast your final bit of air through there. Next, we're going to take both these jets out. These main jets are pretty easy to clean as they're so big. Hold them up to the light, see if you can see through there. Blast them out with an air compressor. A little bit of carb cleaner goes a long way. Now we're on to the idle jet, the pilot jet. This is where 99% of our problems come from. The bike won't run. The bike obviously won't idle without the pilot jet being clean. But it also, the first third of the throttle is affected by this jet. And if it's messed up, you'll have a heck of a time getting your bike to run right. If you have a real corroded or gelled up float bowl, I recommend getting a new pilot jet. Sometimes you can clean these and you'll be able to see through them just fine, but they'll plug right up again. There's a couple little shelves, there's a couple little spots in there where things can build up. And they're only $5 or $10 at the store. Blast these ports out really well with carb cleaner and compressed air. I like to run the slide up. Make sure you take a look at the residue on the needle valve. If there's anything, you got to clean it off. Even the tiniest little piece of residue can change the mixture. Like we're ready to put it back together. Remember not to over tighten these jets. They need to be in there snug, but this is just brass and aluminum. These threads can strip out pretty easily. Next, we need to check the accelerator pump. Go ahead and put a little bit of gas down in the bottom of the bowl, and using a pick or something, press down on the diaphragm in the accelerator pump. See, that's not good. If it shoots back out the carburetor, there's a little ball bearing in here that provides a one-way valve for this. We got to go in and inspect. There's 3 Phillips on the bottom. Inspect this diaphragm for any rips or holes. Plug up this top hole with your finger and blast some compressed air in the bottom. Right in your face. Oh, watch out. Jeez. You guys are probably better off doing this without me pulling that kind of stunt. Okay, jeez. He's got to recuperate after that, shooting gas in my face. Okay, if everything's clean in there, you'll be able to shake the bowl and you'll hear that little marble ball bearing in there. And that should move freely. That's what creates the one-way valve so that it pushes the gas up into the accelerator pump nozzle. All right, let's try this again. You can see it's shooting out the nozzle on the top. That's what we want to see. It's time to reassemble it. Make sure this rod coming down from the throttle linkage goes into the accelerator pump. All right, let's get this back on the bike and see how we did. Before putting it all back together, take a good look at your intake manifold. Make sure there's no cracks. Any little bit of air seeping by will cause performance issues. Start by putting the cables on in the same order that you took them off. Cable's already hooked to the butterfly. Go ahead and then install the bracket that mounts it. Top of the carburetor, there's this little bushing that goes in and stops this top bolt from crushing the plastic. Make sure that's not missing. You can go ahead and drop your screwdriver anytime you like. Okay, the 2 things to check before you proceed. Make sure the spring is up above the bracket, and make sure that collar is underneath the bracket, stopping the screw from crushing the plastic. Run the fuel line and the choke cable back where they're supposed to be. Now's a good time to install your new vacuum lines before you forget. Here's the port for the VOES. The switch is right here. It goes into the wiring harness. It would probably be worth putting this vacuum line on before you put the carburetor in. Or you could move a few of these spark plug wires and it would give you a lot better access as well. Push the carb in with some real force as you wiggle it around in a circular motion and make sure it's seated in as far as it can go. There's a gasket on the inside of the air cleaner housing. Make sure that's there and intact. You can go on with these 3 bolts. And then in with these larger ones. Make sure you're not flexing the air filter housing back. You can, if this carburetor isn't seated all the way, you can crack these air filter housings. When I took this choke cable off, I mistakenly showed you to remove this outside collar, but you don't need to. It's only the back 17 millimeter nut that has to be removed. Don't know what that's about. Don't over tighten that like I just did and break the choke cable housing. Oh, I'm so frustrated with myself. Just call me Zip Tie John. I'm trying to fix this until I get a new one ordered. Zip tie works pretty good. I might never actually fix that. I'm too impatient to put the gas tank on, and I don't trust the fuel valve on this tank. So we're going to go ahead and start this without the gas tank. You need to plug up the vacuum line, or else your bike's going to run too lean, and then just insert some fuel down the fuel tube. Ooh, try not to spill it everywhere like I'm doing. All right, let's give it a shot and see if we did any good. Open up that garage door before I pass out in here. Well, she's running good. I got the oil draining down there. Gonna give it an oil change. Gotta check over a few other things. I got a cracked tire in the front. Might need to find a tire before the test ride. But I'm gonna start buttoning it back together. Take this thing out on the road. Thanks for joining.